Good afternoon, everyone. I hope the lunch hasn't been too heavy, but judging from the smiling faces, awake faces, I can see that we are back on track. Welcome to this 2A session. It's dedicated to pre-consumer textile waste or post-industrial, let's say, fabric textile waste. The topic, as I was saying in the beginning this morning, it is quite interesting. It is quite interesting to me, and we have, of course, four brilliant panelists today that will join us. Mrs. Vidya Khan from BGMA. She is in charge within the BGMA of circularity, right? Harshita, in person, also here from India. She is representing a company called Reverse Resources, quite a well-known stakeholder in the scene of circularity. We have online our dear friend, Mr. Edwin. There you go. Hi, Edwin. Nice to see you again. Welcome online to this session. Edwin is the CEO of the Hong Kong Research Institute on garments and textiles. The name is HK Rita. And the last one, but not the least, is Burju, which is a senior expert in circular economy and sustainable consumption at Adelphi. Adelphi is a well-known consultancy company. Right, Burju?
Indeed, we work a lot in the region as well, in the textile sector. Hello, everyone. Very nice to be with you.
And Burju will present some slides today from Jordan experience. So let's get back into the topic. As I was saying this morning, there's quite a lot of waste around the garment business. The issue has never been really fully addressed in a comprehensive and definitive solution manner. The reason is that one of the reasons of the increased attention is that actually polyester is on the rise. Production in cotton traditionally has been somehow recycled, and at the end of the day, cotton is biodegradable, but polyester is not. And somebody said this morning that is the new plastic. Therefore, we will discuss about this. Polyester and about recycling in general. So I would like to start with Vidya. Vidya has been working. Bangladesh is in the top of mind of all the sourcing managers in the world. Therefore, there are a lot of garments produced there, and we would like to know what's going on right now in Bangladesh, and how do you see the problem? How would you address the fabric waste?
Good afternoon, everybody. In Bangladesh, of course, now we are basically talking about green factories. We're very proud of where we are in the number of factories that we have. We have 165 green factories, about 700 new applicants. Everybody and anybody who just about opens a factory now in Bangladesh, it tends to be green. There's a lot of talk of financing. Our Bangladesh Bank is, and even donor agencies like JICA and the rest of them, they are offering a lot of green financing for factories, individuals. And then, of course, 7 of the top 10 lead factories in the world are in Bangladesh at the moment. We are talking about purchasing practices, about green factories, and how factories perhaps sometimes don't feel as incentivized because we are not getting a premium price. If we open a green factory to begin with, that's one thing, and dealing with new buyers. But if we are an existing factory that converts to becoming green, then it's not necessarily the case that we're getting a higher price from our existing buyers who do preach about green incentives and green sustainability factors generally. Other than that, we're talking about circularity as part of our entire sustainability project that the BGMEA is now very focused on. And of course, with circularity, we are talking about upcycling, recycling. We are trying to spread the knowledge and know-how of what is circularity. Recently, we attended the Global Fashion Agenda, and we have been kindly given a grant by UNIDO and Bestseller. And one of the biggest initiatives of that grant is that we use it to educate the industry about what is circularity, what are the benefits, and how the industry can benefit from it. Thank you.
So thank you. That means that essentially the very knowledge of the concept is not yet established.
Not throughout the
Not throughout.
masses of the factories that we have.
So this is one challenge. And if you would have to name some more challenges that are out there in specifically recycling of fabric or the residual of the industrial production, what would you say?
Firstly, the waste, the post-production waste that we have, it's a very informal sector. You would know, Masi, you're from Italy, that I think in Prato 100 years ago, you had the same problems, that the collection of jute itself was a problem, what we call the wastage jute in Bangladesh. Right now, it sweeps into the informal sector. About 400,000 tons of wastage is collected every year. 60% of which is mostly exported to India. 10% goes into incineration. Only 5% is actually now beginning to get recycled, but that too not necessarily recycled to the level of exporting and making more products from export quality. And we don't have government policies as such which encourage factories to become recycling their products in the sense of recycling the waste. So I think primarily the biggest challenge that we have right now is knowledge. Because of course, with everything that we can recycle, we deal with about $117 million worth of wastage every year. If we could recycle our cotton wastage, which is what Bangladesh generally produces, we would be saving about $500 million worth of exporting virgin cotton into our industry. So these are numbers that our industry manufacturers are not aware of and therefore not working towards. Of course, I believe Bangladesh being a very forward, we're very mature, we're very transparent, and I think we're one of the most sustainable industries within our region right now, as far as garments production goes. So I think, once the knowledge sweeps in and a few government policies are changed, which is, of course, partially, most importantly, the duty of the BGMEA, I think there will be a lot of changes going forward.
Okay, thank you. And this brings me to Harshita, our next panelist. And I would like, you represent Reverse Resources. It means that it's a platform for a possible solution, and also perhaps on how to spread the knowledge about how much recycling garment is, how much fabric is out there up for recycling. So you might want to add to that.
Absolutely, and thank you for having us here today, JZ, Masi. First of all, Reverse Resources is an organization that is primarily focusing on redefining how waste is perceived within the textile industry, right? It's not waste, it's a resource. And with that, we're working towards ensuring that all relevant stakeholders reduce their dependency on virgin materials. Like that is the goal and the vision and the mission that we have and that we work towards. And within that, we offer digital tools and services to investigate all the market barriers in the industry that are in the way of effective and efficient recycling, right? And to make it a lot more specific, right? How do we do that? We have on our digital platform that brings visibility to textile waste. Where is it? In what quantities? In what compositions, qualities, so on and so forth. It's really essential to make these textile waste streams visible such that they get appropriately recycled in different parts of the globe. And that starts with just quantifying. A lot of the facts that Vidya just shared come from our collaboration in Bangladesh. Just by quantifying how much waste there is, what is the opportunity that it offers, not just for the recycling industry, but also for the domestic manufacturing industry, right? It starts from the point number one, quantifying what textile waste is out there, making it visible. And then along the way, match it to suitable recyclers that are perhaps outside the country, but also domestically. And embedding traceability as this textile waste moves along the supply chain. There are lots of benefits to traceability. We can chat about that later. But along the way, ensuring there's a digital chain of custody up until the recyclers is something that we offer through our platform. And eventually, the long-term goal is that more textile waste gets recycled at its inherent value, and eventually that recycled output finds its way back into apparel manufacturing. So textile to textile recycling is what we focus on with all that we offer in terms of digital tools and services.
So if I understood well, it's all about building a new value chain where the waste is all about giving a value to the waste. And if the waste has a value, it's not waste anymore, but it's a byproduct of the production. The point gets difficult when we are talking about polyester. And I would like to introduce here Edwin, who has worked hard with the Research Institute in order to approach the polyester and the blends, polyester and cotton blends, that are really one of the problems out there. Edwin, do you want to add something?
Sure. Well, thanks for having me. My apologies for not being there in person.
Closer to the mic, please.
Yes. Is this slightly better? So one of the challenges of recycling currently is that it's not only polyester, a non-renewable resource and the fastest growing material that we use, but also that most of the garments that we use these days are made with blended materials. So unless we can separate the individual materials, it's very hard to create high value second purposes for them. So at the Research Institute for Textile and Apparel, we work on several things about recycling. So we work on the traditional improvement of mechanical and chemical recycling. We work on advances in biological recycling. But also we have recently launched at scale what we call the hydrothermal system of separating and then recycling fiber to fiber. And this is the Green Machine, a system that we have recently installed in a manufacturing site in Indonesia. And the idea here is to create a very short recycling route so that it can be cost effective to harvest as high value as possible materials for reuse, to keep the materials in as good of a quality as possible so that they perform as well as they would in their virgin form. And then finally, to make this quite feasible and accessible to manufacturers so that it is something that is a competitive advantage or a business proposition for them in their business.
Thank you, Edwin. We have the last panelist on board today, Burju, who is based, if I'm not wrong, in Jordan, and she has a few slides to show us. And Burju, I want to ask you one question. You recently looked at the opportunity for pre-consumer textile recycling in the country where you live. What are the key takeaways that you have from the study you ran?
Thank you so much, Masi. And also, it's a great pleasure to be there with all the experts doing their best really to close the loop, which is a huge challenge. I'm looking forward to learning from you as well. Well, I'm actually in Adelphi in Berlin, and we are also part of the GIZ Fabric project working in Asia, but also in the Middle East, as Masi said, in Jordan. Just to visualize what I like to say, I have a couple of slides here. We are focusing specifically in a industrial estate called Al Hassan. It's in the 50 kilometers from the capital, Amman, and we are looking into a rather small, maybe 26 companies producing ready-made garments. And the learnings are very much to do with a systematic process of looking into these opportunities and circularity. The first learning, I think, is when we talk about post-consumer waste. There is so much thinking going into getting rid of it. The first thing, and it is the switch that we have to do. What it means circularity. So we are talking about really trying to stop what goes to the landfill. The other thing is exactly what Hashita said, understanding what we're really dealing with. So what we start in the process is really to understand the data. So I think the first learning is using tools and doing an analysis like material flow analysis in the whole chain, and then looking where really the biggest chunk is coming out, what is really coming out, how does this waste look like. And it's not only fabric, of course, it gets blended with paper and plastic. So in our case, we found out 34 tons is coming out every day from this estate. And when we look into this, 90% is fabric. And as Edwin was saying, we are here dealing with RMG factories producing like sports functional clothes. And it's a mixed polyester cotton, which is extremely difficult so to deal with. So in that sense, the first issue is really understanding. The first learning is really understand your data, the same message like to give, and use tools for that, and understand the composition and then where it's coming from. And we know also that I think it's in the description of this session, is we cannot really avoid around 20%, in our case is 20% of the waste coming out, and it's coming out mainly from cutting. So what we could do, we looked into these options in a systemic way, trying to really hinder the system leakage. And I like to say that this estate is in a free trade zone, and it doesn't cost anything to the manufacturers really to dump it to the landfill. And because of the pressure coming from the brands, European and American brands, there is a lot of interest now really to stop this leakage and look into options. And the first option is this 70%. Trying to reduce the cutting waste is very difficult, but we still have, for example, 3D cutting, really seamless cutting options, though that could really maybe take away 1% or so. And as you know, I think all the experts know better, it's really not so easy to apply in all kinds of yarns. So that is sometimes not really an option. The other thing we look into is really what is the possibility to maybe have this waste utilized right away on the site, not putting it on a platform and trading it, but on the site with other sectors. So like this is also done quite often in the countries in the region, or say in India, giving it to the furniture industry that are very interested for the filling material. And we look into also construction material that, for example, the Farge using it for their new construction material. But these are all related to standards. These are related to how to get this fluff out of the estate at a low cost, and is there a tax to be paid or not. So the policy Vidya talked about is very important to enable this process. Then we look into upcycling, which takes rather a small portion, but entrepreneurs can play a role, of course, creating new products. And there are a lot of opportunities to partner with incubators, and there's a lot in the region. And then we talked about the more traditional, what Edwin said, fiber to downgraded fiber, which is still a huge issue to understand what is feasible, because we don't have databases or any repository of available technology. So it's difficult to create a business case there. That's one of our learnings. And then, of course, comes the most important, which is interesting for them to close the loop on the side, is the chemical recycling option. And as Edwin said, I want to add
we have
that it's
presentation
very
mode?
difficult to. Yes, please.
Can we have the presentation mode?
Yes, I wanted to
Everything.
just stop it to say that not to take so much of the time, that all these options, it is related, which is something not said, to the design specifications, which at the end is about really all the specifications coming from the brands. They need to take also their responsibility, and how to work with them is also a huge challenge for us. And I think we are all looking into it, and I'm looking forward to discussing how to really set up these value chains in collaboration all along the chain.
Thank you, Burcu. So we understand there is a problem out there. Somebody said, probably this morning, gentleman from Bangladesh during the joint session, where he was saying, well, we do have a solution and we bring all our fabric waste up to Europe. But that is not really an option, because we have to transport that. Therefore, we lose all the possible benefits that we gain into the recycling thing. And that brings me to the point, Vidya. The point, one of the main issues, in my opinion, is that there are no real recycling options on the ground with investors and industrialized, not cottage industry, but industrialized people that set up a nearby Arshad factory, something for recycling. So is there anything happening in Bangladesh on this ground? Do you see 10 years from now a recycling industry in your country?
Oh, absolutely. And the reason why I say this is because there's so much money in this industry. So, you could be, honestly, as businessmen, we don't always think of perhaps the environment or social causes. It can be the case. Some people are just driven by the amount of profits that they will make. When people begin to realize how much money there is in recycling the waste, automatically there will be a huge growth in the interest that they have in the industry. Like I said, it's right now there's $117 million, which is just being thrown away into wastage. If 60% of our wastage, and we literally sell our wastage in kilos, in bales, for less than 10 cents a bale, perhaps, and then we buy it back. You mentioned Shams. Shams, for example, takes his waste, sends it to Sweden, brings it back, and then reuses it, right? He's spending so much money in doing the whole process. So the more and more people get to know about what they can do with waste, and the fact that eventually we end up buying our wastage back with money, when we want to say that, we are part of the whole circularity program to our brands, and everybody knows that's the next big thing, then it goes to even our marketing pitch, for example. So in the next 10 years, what we have to do in Bangladesh primarily is that we have to raise the knowledge. The BGMEA has recently also become a signatory to a research project called Circular Economy in Bangladesh Garments Industry, called CREATE, which is funded by the Danish government and led by the Aalborg University, and where the GFA and the Copenhagen Business School are also partners. So that's one big initiative that's going to take place over the next 5 years. I've also already mentioned that we are being funded by GME directly for the next 3 years. And this is all about raising awareness. Apart from that, we have to look at how we can reduce the numbers which are harmful indicators of sustainability, of greenhouse gases, of decreasing our carbon footprints and things like that. We have to have a consumer engagement. We have to bring in the brands on board. And one thing that I don't know how to pronounce it, Bourgeois. Okay. One thing that she said is that the brands have to begin to also design sustainability, circular products, which are more sustainable. So tomorrow, for example, any big brand could be wanting that we become more sustainable in our production process, but they might design a garment for us which cannot be recycled or has elements which are more harmful than others. So that's another factor that must be taken into consideration. We must build infrastructure for collecting and sorting our wastage. And in the long term, in Bangladesh, through policy, we must also try to share transport as logistics as part of the circularity to reduce our carbon footprint. In Bangladesh, we have to start to begin addressing the polyester fabric, because so far we are still mostly dealing with cotton-based wastage. And finally, the McKinsey report, for example, says that circularity would reduce the carbon emission by 30%. And circularity, recycling our goods, our wastages, would help that number go down immensely. So, like I said, going back, I think it's now a very good time to teach our industry partners on behalf of the BGMEA what it can do for us and how it can benefit us.
Yes, in fact, I was coming to you. She's saying people don't know how much money is in it, but I think you can reply very well. And then after Edwin can also take over we recently ran a feasibility study of the green machine. So how much money is there for the fabric waste and how much money is there for a green machine owner?
Well,
Yeah.
Well, thank you for that question. I think that other speakers have said
yes, Edwin. First, Harshita.
Oh, sorry.
Please.
Even before I move on to that question, Masi, I do want to add to what Vidya was sharing, right? That there is a huge future recycling for recycling industry. There is a long-term vision for a thriving recycling industry, right? In the case of Bangladesh specifically, through our work with BGMEA and GFA in Bangladesh, we've identified that Bangladesh specifically has a very unique opportunity. Now, as Reverse Resources, we work extensively to bring to the spotlight that every country needs to have a thriving domestic recycling industry. And within that, Bangladesh specifically has a very unique opportunity because they're starting literally from scratch. So they have a wonderful opportunity to have a blended recycling industry. And what that is basically to have both mechanical recycling capabilities and also chemical recycling, because you don't want to have a disproportionate amount of demand for a particular kind of feedstock, right? You want an ecosystem that offers both capabilities. And in keeping that in mind, Bangladesh has a wonderful opportunity to literally factor that and build that into the ecosystem from day one. of talking to the audience. Yeah, so I just wanted to point that out. And going back to the question that you had in terms of what's the value in the recycling industry, the value at the moment, primarily, let's be very realistic, there is a huge amount of demand for certain kind of compositions only because that's where most of the commercial scale recycling technologies are, and what they're demanding is focused on 100% cotton knits. But in the long term, as more recycling technologies reach commercial scale, there will be a demand for all kinds of blended textiles. And as a precursor to that, all markets need to be streamlined such that there is visibility attached to these waste streams, right? The more that there is visibility there is for the waste streams, the more opportunity for manufacturers to not just get their waste recycled, but also eventually bring back these recycled outputs into their own garment manufacturing. So really have to look at these efforts as commercial viable solutions and not just from a sustainability lens, because this needs to be incorporated into one's business as the norm.
Talking about commercial viability, the GIZ has recently concluded a feasibility study on the machine that Edwin was actually mentioning. The machine has been installed in Indonesia, of course, with the notion of a given, how to say, positive output economically, but the exercise was not done in a financial, scientific manner. And therefore, we at the GIZ, we offer to do something like that, to install the machine in Cambodia. The results were quite positive, without going into details because they are probably confidential. Edwin, you might want to add to that and tell us more. What are also the challenges that you're facing in Indonesia?
Yeah. Thank you. First of all, we don't have a lot of confidential information. We try to share as broadly as possible. The green machine is by no means a comprehensive. It is not a silver bullet solution for all of the woes in our industry. We see it as a piece of the puzzle, and what we worked on here is a method to use just heat and pressure to separate and reuse materials without the use of chemistry or other mechanical means. So the advantage of that is that it preserves the material, and secondly, it's fiber to fiber, and that the simplicity of that and the short processing time for that is what creates the business case for the use of this machine. That it's low cost and yet create high value outputs. One of the tenets of our research institute when it comes to the research around sustainability is that we want to push these solutions out as quickly as possible into the marketplace. The notion that is that we're in the middle of a crisis around climate change, around circularity, around our current business models, and the sooner we introduce new or give companies new options, the better it is for society, for our business in general. And so this system was put in with the belief that we will work on improving and enhancing it as we learn more about how to produce these things, operate these things in a truly industrial environment. Everything is perfect if you have a perfect lab condition to operate this. But when you throw it into a factory, there are going to be some things that we didn't take into consideration in the labs, and we're learning as we go along. So far, no showstoppers or any too many unpleasant surprises. We have valves that leak. We have processes that we want to improve on, and we have new types of materials that and articles that we want to develop to take advantage of the characteristics of the materials that we are producing. The first bulk shipment is going into the marketplace spring 2023. So we are very excited, and that represents the next phase of our experiment. Is that how well will the marketplace receive this, and what is the marketplace? What's the size and what's the value of it in the marketplace? We're learning about it as we go along.
That's actually, my next question was about your timings and how much time you would envision for the machine to be industrially ready. You replied already 2023, and it looks like incredibly behind the corner. So maybe even if it was 1 year after, I would have been extremely happy. But yeah. So perhaps some of the government officials are joining here today from the Ministry of Economy and Finance. And I would say that there are a few investors interested in this machine in Cambodia. This would be the very first recycling industrial initiative ever in this country that is not something of a cottage industry. That address, perhaps not many people know that 60% of the industrial waste of this country, Cambodia, is made of textile residues. It can be piece of fabric, it can be rubber fabric from the footwear production, it can be any other sort of residual from factory, garment factory. That means 60%. Addressing the 60%, and the recycling machine and the green machine would do that, would actually attack the core of this industrial waste in the country. So with this having said, I would like to ask if there are some curiosity that we can satisfy here from the audience, some questions or some other how to say, perspective from Pakistan, from Bangladesh, other from Bangladesh. I'm very curious from Pakistan, what's going on. Anybody, I don't know, Ashak, in your production countries in Vietnam, what is going on this recycling issue? Sir? Yes, you can talk now, I guess.
Thank you very much.
Close to the mic. Very close, yeah. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for asking me. In Pakistan, since long, we are already recycling all this product, but it is totally manually. And for this, not only using our own cutting waste or other waste, rather also importing this waste and converting into fibers. And these fibers, converting to fibers, and these fibers are used for different purpose. First of all, we collect wastage from spinning mills, and these wastage of spinning mills converted into coarser fibers, and from this institutional towels are made for the exports.
But you're talking about cotton.
Cotton.
Yeah, exactly.
No, it's for institutional towel, it's a mix. At least 15% polyester.
I see.
Then for other mixed fibers, it is used for the refilling of the pillows and other bed sprays, other things. A lot of refilling for the refillings, as well as for pure cotton. These can be again sent to spinning mills for the making of fibers. These are, but totally it is a manual, no automations.
Yes, probably Arshita, which comes from India, has a similar model because Pakistan and India actually have very similar industrials.
Exactly. And if I may, Masi, which is why I said in the context of Bangladesh, they have a unique opportunity. But in the context of countries such as Pakistan and India, where there is the presence of a mature recycling industry, the problem statement changes in this context. The task at hand is to investigate now how much of the waste that is available is being valorized or being recycled, maintaining the value that is present within the textile waste, right? The question is not whether it's being recycled or downcycled in the context of our countries. It's more so to identify how much of that is high value textile waste, which can be converted into high value recycled yarns. So channelizing that, identifying that and channelizing that to appropriate stage of recycling becomes the priority. These questions get, customized as per the context in which country of the, manufacturing hub we're looking at. But the aim really is to increase textile to textile recycling.
No question, just
Ashok is belonging to Puma.
Thanks. So just want to share some initiative. It's better now? Right. Yeah. So just wanted to share some experience with our suppliers in Bangladesh. When it comes to cotton, some of the suppliers which are vertical, like factories, those are having garment, then dyeing process, finishing, and also spinning with them. They're able to recycle the cutting waste back into the garment. And two of the key suppliers, they have taken this initiative and successfully done that. But the challenge is here, like when it comes to a garment, we maximum 25% of recycled material can be used. Still 75% fabric has to be virgin. So we are currently doing an experiment to have 100% recycled material garment. But we are still seeing there are problems with characteristics and the strength of the product. So it's not so far very successful, but we hope in future we'll have 100% recycled products. When it comes to polyester, yes, polyester recycled from PET bottle, 100% recycle can be used, but garment to garment recycling or fabric to fabric recycling, it's still a challenge. And when it comes to a blended products, still challenging scenarios still exist there.
So with everything else, I find that Bangladesh is always in the most unique situation. The way we produce garments, for example, knit is very localized generally. Knit is produced in a particular area in Bangladesh, in Dhaka, or wovens in another, and then we have our EPZs, so it's all quite segregated. And so the segregation, although doesn't happen formally, even the informal segregation becomes quite easy. I was just curious. My colleague here said that Pakistan also imports. Harshita here says that India. No, I said that to India we export 60% of our wastage. So what would happen if Bangladesh stopped exporting 60% of its wastage to India? Would India and less Pakistan, more India, would they then not be able to recycle so competitively or so easily? And then would there be a price factor added to this if you weren't getting the wastage that we are giving to you for such a cheap price?
I'm so glad you asked me that question, Vidya, because this is in fact the very statement with which we approach the Textile Ministry of India and all the leading associations such as Apparel Export Promotion Council in India. We've painted this very scenario where we've spoken about that there will be a situation when, as recycling capabilities in Bangladesh improve, the access to textile waste for Indian recyclers will become expensive. It is already heading that direction. That means there will be a lot of demand for local waste. And that means the local waste also needs to be affordable. Right now, Indian textile waste, we know, is at a really unaffordable price, which kind of impacts the recycled outputs that come in. Which goes back to the statement that that we constantly work towards: build domestic recycling capabilities in each of your hubs. It also goes back to the point that Pascal made this morning, right? As EU starts making legislation or starts focusing on how do we shorten the supply chain, that means it's going to move closer to countries like North Africa, as she mentioned. How do garment manufacturers, how do garment manufacturing hubs stay relevant? You start to innovate. And how do you innovate? You bring in recycling capabilities. How do you make that possible? Make your garment destinations not just for virgin garments made out of virgin materials, but also garments made out of recycled outputs. So these are the milestones or the steps that we see in the future.
So essentially, after, yeah, please go ahead.
Thank you, Masi. I just wanted to add two things. One is like it's more tier two. The recycling industry is more tier two. So right now, what we like, we have been talking to the brands. Actually, the brands has been talking to us, the manufacturers, for investment in this recycling sector. What is holding us back in Bangladesh? There are two factories there. Cyclo is one of them. They're doing the recycling. What is holding us back is all the new technologies which is coming up. These are in their initial stage. So we're just waiting for the technology to mature a bit. And if there is a successful industrial run somewhere, only then we will see this investment happening in Bangladesh. And the other thing is that Rivers Resources has a big part to play in this whole process, is to quantify my footprint. Because when we, in Bangladesh, the stage of the industry where we are right now is we try to build stories. We don't just sell a pair of jeans. We try to tag a story. For example, if we're saving water, we just don't want to say like I'm saving 20% water when I'm making this pair of jeans. I want to say, if you buy this pair of jeans from us, you're saving enough water to make 5 cups of coffee. So on the consumer level, we try to break it down with the story. So similarly, we want that quantification done at the level of recycling. So when the consumer buys it, he knows that he has saved so much energy that would have been gone, water usage that would have gone, that would have lasted, in Europe, typical European household, 2 weeks worth of energy. So something like that. So we also need that. Thank you.
So 2-3 takeaway are that there is a lot of waste, a lot of textile waste over there that is not utilized. There is value in this waste and should not be considered waste. Recycling operations in Southeast Asia and some Indian subcontinent, let's say on polyester at least, are really lacking. And I remind you that polyester in the last 20 years grow to immensely. I guess we are close to the values of cotton. Therefore, it's something to watch. And I have one technical question, Edwin. I read somewhere that if I am a very, conscious consumer, I go out there and I buy a PET recycled polyester t-shirt. I wear it, I use it, I throw it. That t-shirt is actually not recyclable anymore because of some polymer process that has gone into, and basically there is no possibility of recycling a recycled PET polyester. Is that true, Edwin? To what extent is true? I don't know.
So yeah, that's an interesting question. So there is, the answer is yes, and the answer is also no. It is hard to recycle polyester because of all the costs and the issues involved. And polyester sheds, and there are it gets more brittle, and it loses its value. And conceivably, you can continue to recycle it, but you would have to blend in more and more virgin content to strengthen the material and to make it feel a little bit better on the hand feel. Now, we have also developed technologies like solid state polymerization, in which we strengthened the the tenacity of weaker polyester material, so that you can actually it comes out stronger and better. But it's an expensive and energy intensive process, and unless we have a high value application, it is not practical to do that again. Currently, I would also add that a lot of polyester are made from rPET, which are made from old water bottles and what have you, chipped water bottles. It is much better to keep water bottles in water bottles, so solid to solid recycling. As soon as you turn it into a fiber, you create all sorts of issues. You also reduce the value of the polyester, and you also reduce the opportunity for it to be reused in other forms. I hope that answers some of that question you're asking.
Yes, I'll be back to you in 1 second, sir. That gives me another fourth takeaway, that perhaps next time we buy something, we should be conscious about buying polyester, perhaps, because it's actually so difficult, even if it's recycled, to get it back into the system. Sir, up to you. Very close to the mic, please.
Okay, thank you. I have a question with the admin. Just we ask for when you recycle, it's become polymer, and polymer cannot be recycled again. But when you have the naphthalene cracker in our country, naphthalene cracker, this polymer can be converted into other useful chemicals. Okay, Edwin, you have to explain.
Yeah, like I said, thank you for that question. I think, of course, you can depolymerize and repolymerize the material. It's just energy intensive. It's chemistry intensive. It's just the value that it creates doesn't make the process worth going through. We need to create a new business case for it, I think.
Yes, exactly. And if there is no business case, it will probably end up in a landfill, even if it's recycled. Anyway, sir, Mr. Pon, Your Excellency, please.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, close to the mic, please, again.
Just a very quick one, but I just want to learn a little bit from the case of Bangladesh, especially we start from the day one, how to have like ecosystem, how the government can provide enabling environment that investor kick in to, invest in some green machinery, whatever, in order to recycle one. And just Masi mentioned, 60% of the industrial waste, is made from a textile residue. And I just worry, this will continue. But a few years back, I also joined the team to do the recycling business. And then we have a trip to Europe to study about that one. But from the research on the study in the case of Cambodia, the total number of waste is not enough to be commercialized. So I mean that anyone that invests in this kind of recycling industry activity, they will not make money. They need a subsidy from the government, one thing. And then we need to import the waste, like the case of India investor from Bangladesh, to make that good enough quantity to make money. So how the government of the Bangladesh, start from the day one to provide ecosystem and then some other enabling environment that the investor, as well as, the cooperation between the manufacturing, industry, that you produce the waste, and then some other part that can work together, that this continue to be the good case that you just mentioned, a very good case of Bangladesh on this one. So how to do from the day one?
So your question basically is how our government can help with the recycling process or help initiate recycling process?
Yes, in the beginning, how to make it happen.
Well, I think it would have to start with incentives. And it would not just be, for example, while we are graduating from the LDC status, Bangladesh now, we are going to lose most of our tax benefits. Although the BGMEA has visited the European Commission and we are negotiating for a longer period to do the graduation, I think one of the things that our government could start with as a policy is to give us the incentives, tax breaks. And that would definitely, encourage factories to deal with their waste in-house rather than shipping it out. So if we could have a system of being more environmental friendly, and that again, like I said, the next 3 years is a big challenge for us. It's not just educating the manufacturers to keep the wastage and reuse it properly, but it's also to go to policy level, the government policy level makers to say that, can you help us to make the industry understand how to handle their waste better? So perhaps with subsidies, with incentives, Bangladesh as it is, we do get a lot of incentives from our government. Green incentives are there. Interest rate of Bangladesh Bank when it gives out green loans is at about 4, 5, 6% as opposed to the regular rate of about 9% or 10%. So like I said, money is always a good incentive. So it would be a question of going to our policymakers and also making them understand, let's do this for the future, because being sustainable is not just for the brand. Being sustainable is for us, for our children, for the environment, and for the world going forward. We do not want to leave a world in which our children cannot breathe and eat properly.
Thank you,
Thank
Vidya.
you.
We do have a question online. No, we don't. Do we have it, George? We have some questions. We have very less time. Very briefly, we are left with 6, 7 minutes.
All right. So the question is, could you mention something on legal hinders to transport textile cut waste from production countries to points of possibility of recovery, and, if possible, how to overcome those difficulties?
Yeah, we couldn't really understand the question. I'm sorry, because the mic is probably not working, or if you can.
Let me try this one.
Yeah, very close, please.
All right. Could you mention something on legal hinders to transport textile cut waste from production countries to points of possibility of recovery? So legal hinders on how to when you transport textile waste from production countries, and how to overcome those difficulties.
So the question is about how to transfer technology to the production countries, right?
The question was, I think, what are the legal barriers which prevent the export of textile waste to other countries?
Oh, that's a very good question. Probably, as a moderator, I shouldn't reply to that question. I would give, if Bourgeois, or if somebody wants to reply to the questions, I will add a few thoughts after. Edwin?
Yeah, well, there are countries, for example, the big one is China, who will not allow for the import of used materials, because it has become years ago became a dumping ground for everybody's waste. And you see that in certain countries in Africa today. Ghana is the one that stands out, in which everybody is exporting their waste there, and it's an out of sight, out of mind challenge. I think it has been said earlier in our panel that the solution is to develop local waste process and capabilities, and to process and create businesses to deal with these on a much more local, or at least on a regional basis. I think that in the long run makes this a much greener, more competitive business, because you then reduce the cost for transportation, and then you actually create new work opportunities for the local population. Thank you.
If I
please, Bushu.
Yeah, if I may add, there's maybe looking into the Middle East side of the picture, there we have many fair trade free trade zones, and obviously there what kind of waste at which stage you're taking it out is makes quite a difference. For example, if you like to take out processed waste and have a bit more earnings when selling the waste, it might bump into value-added tax barrier. So there are issues in these zones at which stage you're taking it out or not, and it becomes much more profitable actually to just dump it, as I was saying. Talking about the incentives, government incentives, I think for Cambodia, it would be quite important to, one thing is to set targets at the very end for landfill, what goes to the landfill, and on the upstream, R&D partnerships, for example, green vouchers or partnerships with the universities, international partnerships are quite important, where the brands can be also actually given some responsibilities. And one way of just coming back to the issue, also the barrier, one way of getting over these barriers, for example, Turkey had a ban recently, and they overruled it with a certain certificate that could help a certain quality waste to be imported. That is also, I think, interesting to look at how to tackle the dumping. The same is done in Turkey for plastics. So again, I think it's a very complicated matter, but I totally advocate the same. We talk about circularity. We should close the loop at the ideally in the same cluster, and we should keep the materials, as you said, at the highest level, which is as of today is impossible, in fact. So we have to blend with virgin materials. So we need urgently impact investors, risk taking investors coming in, and policy can de-risk that, because policy can say, I'm going to build such an industry in my country, and I will give incentives. You have guarantee to grow this industry. You have the land, you have the workforce. So we need urgently this kind of policy de-risking for early stage innovative partnership investments.
Yes. I can give another example. In the feasibility study of the green machine, we just wanted to move 300 kilo, just 300 kilo of polyester fiber, the output of the green machine, from one country to another. And we are still not yet able to do that, because in theory that is recycled fiber or fabric waste fiber, we call it whatever you want it, but basically we do have those barriers. Therefore, it's not so simple to approach, because the moment you are trying to solve one thing, there is another problem that comes out. Another topic that particularly in Cambodia, but I believe also Bangladesh has almost everywhere, is that whenever you import your fabric from abroad, you import it duty-free in order to export the equivalent into garments, right? So you import 100 meters of fabric and you make your shirts and you export 95 shirts, right? Now that 5% that is waste, you, in theory, need to justify that to the government, right? Because the government will say, oh, you might have exported 90 t-shirts and 5% is waste, and 5% you sold it underground into the market. Now you have to pay the taxes. So we do have a problem. The problem is that supposing I want to sell that 5% of wastage, therefore making money out of it, the legislation is such in all the country that you are obliged to pay taxes on that 5%, quite a lot. And often the fine is that you have to pay taxes on the other 95% as well. Because you imported the fabric duty-free, you're not supposed to sell it into the country, not even as a wastage. If you make 1 penny, you have to pay taxes. And this is something that obviously does not encourage the recycling and encourage the fact that waste remains waste at zero value, and I need to get rid of it at zero value. Or at the best, I sell it for a small amount, petty amount, to the guy next to me who will dump it somewhere, and that becomes informal. And therefore, we do have a problem that we will set up, if we will set up an industrial estate that will recycle officially the fabric from Cambodia, supposedly, that estate needs to give some sort of certificate saying, I got that 5% from this factory and I'm reprocessing it. So it's also a legal issue, a legal battle. In Bangladesh, there are all sorts of discussions about the percentage of waste every year. Please go ahead, Ashad.
You're exactly right. My company started the first process with Renewcell. It took me 1.5 years just to get the permission, because the problem is in my garments, which is outside the export processing zone, I had no issues. I work with reverse resources in that. That's the cutting wastage, like from the garments. That's not an issue. The issue is inside the export processing zone, because everything is duty free. I bring in everything without any duty. Once I'm trying to, send the containers out at zero cost and then bring it back, trying to explain that to the Minister of Commerce and the customs officials was a nightmare. But it took me 18 months, but we got it done. But now the EU is working in a project in Bangladesh with the Bangladesh government, is a part component of that. The Minister of Commerce is there. They're actually making them understand about circularity. So in their policy, all these points will be integrated in the coming months.
And that's, I think, it's a lesson to learn from Bangladesh, even though it costed him 3 months to make the government officials understand. At the end, you make it, and you also have a dialogue with the EU. I guess we are done with our time, and it's 14:17. It's 2 minutes late, just. But I want to talk about something more. I'm joking.
Me too.
I think I would like to thank our online audience. If there are no more questions, we can wrap up the session. And thanks to all the panelists. Thank you, Edwin. Thank you, Burju, for joining us. Harsh, Vidya.
Please give a big hand to our
thanks.
panelists and Masi.